Dave, what's up? How you doing today?
Hey, Gus. Good. Thanks.
Today's episode is a person, we're both been into these data and analytics for the Pirates.
Yes.
We like data and analytics for how fast the ball leaves the stadium, how many strikeouts the Pirates have every day.
Yeah. They're right. Swing at bad pitch ratio for Martin.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a gentleman who'll be coming on. He grew up kind of on the north side, went to NA, ended up going to Carnegie Mellon. But he is like a data and analytics guru.
He's a genius when it comes to that. Just our few minutes with him, that was pretty evident right off the bat.
And it's interesting because he's always loved sports. He always loved the numbers, that data side of sports and analyzing it. And so then he graduates from college, and he's like, okay, what am I going to do? And he always had an idea in the back of his mind of what company he would start if he could, right? So what's crazy is?
What?
He got picked to go on to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
What I think is interesting is the process and how that happened.
Right. It wasn't immediate.
It wasn't immediate, and it was on a touch-tone phone answering questions, 5 questions, pressing the buttons, and then hanging up. And then 9 months later getting a call saying you're on.
Right, and you're on. So he goes on to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, has a couple lifelines and all that, like everybody knows the show. Wins $100,000, says that's it, I'm taking it, and started his company, Number Fire.
Yeah, well, he had the number he needed to win dollar-wise in order to create his company.
Right.
And he didn't risk answering the question, getting it wrong, and falling under that number. So he pulled away, took the check, started a company. Now he's flying high on a...
Yeah, well, and so he starts Number Fire, right, doing what he loves to do, data analytics on sports, all kind of sports. And so lo and behold, who buys him? FanDuel. So sells his company to FanDuel, becomes a chief product officer at FanDuel, and the rest is history. And so Nik Bonaddio is going to be our guest today, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting for us to hear maybe it's a higher level of data analytics than what we think we know.
It's the stuff they track is stuff you can't even imagine is tracked.
Yes.
But the exciting thing about FanDuel is now you can wager in Pennsylvania. I know they have some specials going out for the Pitt-Penn State game. And, you hear a lot of FanDuel on the radio now.
A lot of FanDuel. And the crazy thing is that you can't do sports betting in Ohio, but you can do it in Pennsylvania, and they have to figure out where you are.
Yeah, he's
going to explain that a little bit.
Hearing how they do that, exactly. Right, I know.
So we're excited to have Nik jump in the huddle with us today here on Huddle Up with Gus. So welcome into the huddle, Nik Bonaddio. All right, Dave, today we have Nik. Nik is the Chief Product Officer at FanDuel, but before that, he has a great story. He's from local here in Pittsburgh, grew up in Wexford, was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I can't wait to hear that story. And then from that, he started his own company.
He might be one of the smartest guests we've had on, too. I think,
Definitely. Way smarter than you and I combined. I can guarantee you that.
Fitzpatrick's up there.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Harvard. I don't know. Carnegie Mellon, Harvard.
Yeah.
But welcome to the show.
Thank you so much,
Nik.
guys. Appreciate it.
So I don't want to mess your last name up, so let's say it correctly.
Yeah, it's Bonaddio.
Bonaddio.
So the second D is what throws everyone off. I think there must have been a typo at Ellis Island, or I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, it's Bonaddio.
Bonaddio. So, people mess my name up all the time. They spelled it wrong on my Pro Bowl jersey, so I understand when people don't say it the right way, and sometimes it irks you.
It's kind of the Brett Favre thing.
Favre?
The Favre.
Yeah. So Nik, what we really do on the show, we want to get to the crux of how you fell in love with sports, because we know you're on the whole other side of the sports realm now, where you're the analytics, you're figuring out how to help people understand the game in a different way. So what was that love of sports? Where did that start for you?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and so when you grow up in Pittsburgh, it's impossible not to be a Penguins fan, a Steelers fan. It's just a part of the culture here. And so I was just one of those kids growing up that, I'd come home from school and just immediately go outside. I was lucky enough to live in a neighborhood where there was a bunch of kids my age, and so, I don't know if kids today still do this, but, we just would go out, and if it's in the fall, we play football, and it's in the spring, we play baseball and basketball and hockey and everything. So I was just always sort of like a hyperactive kid, and then my mom just boot me out of the house, be like, go do something. And so sports has sort of always been sort of, one of my hobbies. I like to joke around a lot in my office that, I really in life only really love two things. The first is my wife, and the second is sports. And so it's very important to get that order correct.
Right. Oh, yeah. We understand
Yeah, it's just been a
completely.
part of my life, pretty much, just as long as I can remember.
So when you would go out with those kids in the neighborhood, I mean, to me, that was those are still some of my fondest memories.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
But those times teach you so much about sports and life
Yeah.
in general, because there's no coaches, there's no parents saying get up and all that, and you get knocked down a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it teaches you a lot about perseverance for sure, but it really teaches you about leadership and sort of teamwork. I think as I've moved forward in my professional life, I've had to work with my company, different people from different walks of life, whether they're marketers or whether they're business people or whether they're external third parties that we work with. Sports teaches so much about teamwork and about how to communicate and how to lead teams that when I see resumes of people who come in who have sports backgrounds, I'm immediately attracted to that because those candidates I know will have the ability to really bring teams together.
Well, and also, playing out in the backyard with your friends, you learn how to work out problems.
Sure.
And it's just you guys. There's no umpires, there's no parents.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important aspect that a lot of people are
Yeah.
no longer really experiencing
Absolutely.
when they're not doing that.
And especially here in Pittsburgh, when the weather's cold, you get a little bit tough too. Playing that snow football or playing some hockey in some pretty gross weather. You kind of get a little bit some of that Western PA toughness.
Yeah, and you didn't want to be the kid not to go out because it's
Oh,
cold.
no.
Right? You had to go out. If you were that kid, watch out.
Then they get snowballs thrown at your house and stuff. So it's like,
Well, someone had to play goalie and someone had to play third base. And, I'm not going to let my team down, so I'm going to get my butt outside.
well, I want to ask Nick too, because we have a streak going of guests that have played wiffle balls.
Oh, yeah.
Kids, you're
Huge,
wiffle ball.
huge.
Oh, we love wiffle
Huge.
ball.
I mean, those things you can get a curve that goes 5 feet to the left.
it's
You can really work
ridiculous.
those things.
Well,
Yeah.
it's so fun.
Dave claims that he has a ball that can drop from 12 to 6.
Okay,
I
all right.
haven't seen it yet, so
Well, yeah, we did.
you were supposed to bring that today.
We're
going to
be playing in our studio. We're going to have a special, a wiffle ball special, and I can prove it.
We're
I
going
know
to have
there's
our
been a lot of
wiffle
talk.
ball batting cage.
We'll have a wiffle ball batting cage.
All
Yeah.
right.
Bring
Yeah.
in some of the Pirates and just buckle their knees,
Yeah.
get Josh Bell in here or McCutcheon in here and just bring them up.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That'd be
I'm
great.
bailing out. Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't that you just get Josh Bell off
I think
his hitting
wiffle ball
streak?
can even the playing field a
Yeah.
little bit.
It'll definitely.
Most
Most
definitely,
definitely. So, what's your first memory that you had? Because you talked about you went getting out with all your friends, but what was your first memory of something that was actually, where your parents said, you got to go play this, and, that was that first, what was that first sport for you? Where you got to go play it?
For
It's
me,
organized.
it was probably, probably soccer because youth soccer here is pretty big. I think. My parents were always a little worried about football because, I was always kind of on the small side. So, I'm 6'5" now. I'm on the bigger side, but I was definitely a late bloomer relative towards size. And so my parents were always worried about tackle football. And again, you know how Western PA is. It's kind of rough
Right.
and tumble a little bit. So definitely the most organized sport I played was soccer. But if I point to a sport that I played the most, kind of backyard, it was actually hockey because I grew up in the Maryland Mew era. And so,
Right.
Maryland Mew, late 90s, or the late 80s, early 90s, was the coolest person in Pittsburgh. He was every kid wanted Maryland Mew.
Right.
And so more than any other sport as far as how much I played was actually hockey. But yeah, definitely the more organized one was soccer. And then when I got into high school, I'm playing soccer. I was playing tennis in the spring. And, I always tell a story. So, I was on the small side. I went to NA up in the burbs. And, between the summer between my junior and senior years of high school, I basically shot up from 5'8" to 6'4", 6'5", just like that. And I come back for fall that year, and all of a sudden the volleyball coach wants to talk to me. All of a sudden the basketball coach wants to talk to me.
walking in the hallway?
And I was like, listen, I tried out last year, and you told me hey, good hustle, kid. It's not going to work out, but
Yeah.
keep practicing. And then I couldn't get the time of day from those guys. Now all of a sudden, the basketball coach is like, hey, tryouts are Monday.
Right.
Make sure you're there. I'm like. all right, fine, whatever. But
Girls too, probably. You got a couple looks that you maybe.
no, I don't know. See,
Yeah.
like I was a nerd all the way through. So like, I was playing the long game of like, you know what? Like, one of these days, like being a nerd is going to work out to my advantage.
Right.
High school isn't that time.
Right.
But so I'll just play the long game here.
Well, it helps being a taller nerd, but
Yeah.
rather than a shorter nerd.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
So, right, yeah.
Yeah.
So then when did you get in track? Like, I know that was your
It actually wasn't
passion
until college. So, at CMU, obviously CMU is not exactly D1 sports, but, it was one of those things where I was in a fraternity, and a couple of my fraternity brothers were on the track team. And the coach had an intramural track meet to sort of like say, for people who aren't on the track team, come out and kind of experience track and whatever. And my fraternity kind of formed a track team, and we went to go do it. And, I showed up and I won like 4 or 5 events. I won like the 100, I won the 200, I won the long jump. And the track coach comes over to me. He's like, yeah, you should probably join the track team. And so I ended up joining the team. A couple years later, I was an All-American in track.
That's awesome.
And so, it was funny, like, because, I didn't run in high school, but all the sports that I played kind of turned me into this kind of general athlete. And it turns out that, like, track was the one sport I was just naturally drawn to because of all the different sports I played growing up.
What fraternity were you in?
I was in Kappa Delta Rho.
Wow.
But I saw on Wikipedia that you were a Pike, and they were just, like, kind of across the way from us at CMU.
Yeah. So so Pi Kappa Alpha at Tulsa, they were kind of failing, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so they came to the football team, not the whole team, but
Yeah.
some of us, and they said, hey, we need help. Will you guys help us out? Come to our parties. Come to do everything, right? We'll just make you members.
Yeah, all right.
So now they made us a member, and we would go to the parties, and then all of a sudden their membership started
Yeah,
picking up.
yeah.
And we really didn't do a lot, but I still get all the
Yeah,
letters
yeah,
from them.
yeah.
Like, I'm like, now they say I'm like one of the Pikes that everybody knows.
Yeah, you're
and
on
it's
the notable
it's-
alumni page.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, but it's good. It's a good thing.
Well, at a school like CMU, it's not the kind of school where the party just kind of comes to you, right? You have to sort of seek it out because we're all nerds at CMU. So it was one of those things where, like, if you wanted to have any kind of regularly normal social life, that's kind of what you had to do at a school like CMU. And so I would never have thought myself as being a fraternity guy, and because you think of Animal House, you think of all those stories. It's
Right.
like that wasn't me, but that at a school like CMU, it actually was because that was the only way you could have somewhat of a normal college social life. Otherwise, I'd be just sitting in the dorms playing, Counter-Strike all day or something.
Right. So when you were in high school, you talk about your love of sports,
Yep.
but we know that, you're big into the analytics and,
Sure.
and the
Yep.
numbers of the game.
Yep.
How did it start for you in high school?
Yeah, so, my dad, and we were talking about this, my dad worked for PPG for like 40, 50 years. And so he's like sort of an old school nerd, like way before, back in the slide rule days.
Right.
And, he was always keen to have computers around the house because he sort of foresaw that computers were the way that, it was going to go. And I always had a natural aptitude for math. It was something that I was attracted to. But when I started looking at things like statistics, I used to obsessively track like batting averages. And like back in '94, when John Olerud was about to bat 400, he was batting. Just tracking that and kind of getting an understanding of numbers. And just like I always thought, that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in math, and really the only 2 jobs I ever wanted out of life was either to be a stockbroker or to do something in sports. Being a computer guy, and like right around the time the internet happened, I was like, geez, this is amazing. There's so much more stats I could look at. And I was always just kind of naturally drawn to it. What's interesting about sports is that it's such a rich data set. Everything that happens, every rebound, every goal, every home run is meticulously tracked. It sits in a database somewhere. And I always just wanted to take a look at that data and try to, figure out if I'm going to have an argument with one of my friends around who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. I don't want to just say LeBron James is better because he dunks. That's a very qualitative argument. If the numbers are there, there's got to be some way I can dig into it and try to figure out why exactly LeBron James is better.
You can prove it.
Yeah. And so I was just always fascinated by that because it was the combining of 2 things I really liked. I really liked math, I really liked computers, and I loved sports. And it just seemed like such a perfect
gaming,
fit.
right? So
Yep.
Madden's been around a long time. All these things, Dave and I still talk about Tecmo and all that.
Oh, it's amazing.
Super Tecmo.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So did you
Jackson.
play a lot of that? Because they had some stats in
Yeah.
that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
And now it's crazy what the stats are.
Oh yeah, if I go back and look at my Sega Genesis and Nintendo back in the day, I didn't play any Zelda or anything like that. It was always NBA Jam. It was Tecmo Super Bowl, Madden. Oh yeah, for sure.
Bo
Yeah.
Jackson was
Bo Jackson was
99 or
impossible.
whatever.
Yeah,
it
you
was the greatest.
just
that sweep would you're gone.
Amazing.
Yeah, you just gave it. It was like when I coached Ezekiel Elliott in high
Yeah.
school. And that was like my Bo Jackson. I just give it to Zeke, and like he'd score a few times, and then we let everybody else play.
My friends actually give me like a bunch of crap for this sometimes. Because like if I were to play Madden, it's not actually playing Madden that I like so much. It's the franchise mode. I like signing players. I like trades.
Right.
Like I like making the rosters because the game itself is fine, but like it's really for me more about like, how do I figure out how to make the best trade? Like, so like it's almost like being a GM a little bit. Like that's actually more what I'm interested in versus the actual game itself. So yeah, this I love playing Madden in those kind of games, like NCAA football, that old game. Like I used to love recruiting. The game itself like was okay, fine, whatever. But like I wanted to turn Pitt into a 37-time national champion.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah.
No, I was similar, and I think but now we're going back again to the Tecmo Bowl days. But you could compile. There was at the end you could compose rosters. I think I would play. I'd do this roster, roster, but then once someone scored on me, I think I'd start over then. Because I wanted to make
make it perfect. Yeah.
Like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
I had Jerome Lane at defensive tackle, or Jerome Brown. How did that happen?
Jerome Lane, he probably would have been a good.
He would have been
good.
He'd
been good, like tight end or something. Yeah.
My boys do that too because they play. I mean, they're in college and they'll play Madden and all that. And their favorite thing is to recruit. Like they can trade players, they can get new ones. They can work towards getting a better player and all that, and then they make these crazy teams, and then they go out and play. And I go, well, why don't you guys go on? I don't even know what it's Twitch. I think it is, right? That everybody can watch it. They're like, nah, we don't care about that. We just like playing with each other. Yeah. But it's a great way for them to stay connected.
Sure,
because
absolutely.
they're all over the place.
Oh yeah, and like when you go online, look at like fantasy sports, like what FanDuel does with DFS and sports betting. There's so many opportunities for people to interact with sports and just dig into the research and dig into the numbers. Like there's probably so many more people like me now than there were even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Just like everyone's kind of turned into this, kind of Nate Silvery, like sports math guy because, it's, we look at fantasy sports and look at, like DFS and betting, like it encourages that kind of thinking. It encourages you not to just be like, oh, well, I'll start Ben this week because Ben is awesome. Like, no, like I'll start Ben this week because, maybe they're playing the Bengals and the Bengals have a pretty weak pass defense and they're really susceptible to third down and Ben passes a lot on third down. Like, it's sort of opened up the veil to sports. I think a lot of people typically thought that what happens in a sports match is relatively random. Things just happen. But they don't just happen. There's, inherent biases that, coordinators have, that teams have, that coaches have, that, you're only going to get to really understand once you dig into the numbers.
And speaking of Ben in the state of Ohio, what's his record in the state of Ohio? It's like 42-2, or something like that.
Really?
So that's so remember that. Right?
Yeah, I won't remember that. I know, but you'll remind me.
Well, some of that stuff actually isn't all that useful because you'll always hear some people say like, well, the Bengals are not 7-0 in dome games where it's 32 degrees or less outside, 3 days or less after it rained. Like there's some things which are so arcane that they're actually not all that predictive.
Right.
So you kind of have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt some of the times. But, it is interesting just the amount of data that's available.
Where I think a lot of that started was when Tampa Bay always used to have to go up to Green Bay and play.
Right.
And they would never win because they just
warm weather, cold weather. Yeah.
Oh, it just does something to you when you practice in warm, and then all of a sudden you're in like 30 degrees.
Right.
You're just so much colder, and it's just such a different way.
Well, like a turf to grass. I mean, look at a team like the Saints or the Falcons. I mean, I don't know this for sure. I'd have to go look into it, but like I have to think that their record on turf is probably like, 650, 700, but on grass it's probably closer to 500 because it slows the team down. They can't do the things they usually do, and that stuff is real. And it's only recently that people have the ability, from a data perspective, to really dig into that stuff.
Right. Like also another big one, and I don't know if this is true or not, but you always hear about the West Coast teams playing a 1:00 game in the East. I don't know what the breakdown is there. If that's just like a myth or a thought, or if there's really evidence.
It's probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, like you look at they have the London games. Like those games are always super low quality, right?
Yeah,
because travel does impact. Like it changes your sleep. It changes your sort of out of your rhythms.
Yeah.
Like you don't do the things you do to prepare yourself. I'm sure it's real, but like it's just a matter of like, is it so real that it spurs you to go take an action on that? Like that's where the line is.
I mean, it depends on the teams, too. It's not so much the time zone.
Sure.
I mean, you have to look at the teams. It's kind of like going back in some of the stats you were talking about earlier. You're digging into, some past results that no one who's playing that day was barely even born when you're still pulling stats from that time.
Yeah.
That's kind of weak. I don't know.
Yeah, football from an analytics perspective is actually the hardest of the major four sports. One, because there's smaller sample size. There's only 16 games a season versus 162 in baseball. So there's a sample size problem. And also the sport of football has changed so much that it's very difficult to compare the game in the 70s or the 80s to now.
The rule changes really impact that.
And so it's hard to sort of if you've got a data point from the 80s that you're trying to use to, use as a data point to predict what's going to happen now, that signal is a little bit weak. And so in baseball, it's easier. Basketball, it's easier. Football's the hardest. But which is basically why, you look at baseball was the precursor to all this. The data analytics people and the Moneyball types all the way back in sort of the mid-'90s. That was a while ago. Basketball is almost 100% analytics based. You look at the Rockets with Daryl Morey, very, very analytics based. And football is just, definitely behind the other sports because, it's a little bit, kind of an old school mentality. And I've had discussions with different teams where they kind of looked at me who's this nerd? You never played football. How can you come in here and tell me how I should run my team or who I should draft or what plays I should call? And so there is a little bit of reticence in the football world, but it is definitely changing. I think
with football, they're putting RFID tags
Sure.
and they're tracking all that data,
Yep.
that down to minutia of every movement. But the thing is that I think they've collected it for so long now, they don't really know how to use it.
Yeah.
They haven't released it, the NFL, and so that's really hard for them to, they don't know how to use it, and they don't just want to release it because it's not only if, let's say you have an RFID tag on a defensive end, right? It's not necessarily, let's say that he got one sack, but he had, how many times was he closest to the quarterback in that whole game, compared to everybody else,
right.
Or tackles, because there's stats there's a tackle
Sure.
for loss and all that, but he might have been right there at the ball every time all game, so
Sure.
his productivity was high,
Yep.
but it wasn't in the normal stats that you would
Sure.
see.
Yeah, there's a sort of common maxim in the data world, which is garbage in, garbage out, which is if the quality of your data isn't very high, then the quality of the analysts, the analysis of that data won't be very high. And so, there probably is a lot of data they're collecting, but whether that's useful data is a different story. Just because you have some information doesn't mean it's going to ultimately be predictive of what you want. And so, I don't think in football you'll have a revolution like you had in basketball. Again, look at the Rockets. All they do is shoot threes. It's either dunks or threes. And, you won't see a team dramatically change around and suddenly start passing the ball 90% of the time. NFL won't have that change because that's probably getting too far away. But you will see them going on fourth down more. You will see them making small adjustments to maybe go to wider sets more. So it's there's going to be incremental changes. I don't think the game itself will dramatically change. And I think you'll really see a change in the way people evaluate players for drafting and scouting purposes. I think that's really where a lot of analytics is most useful for NFL.
So let's go back, all right? So you go to Carnegie Mellon.
Yep.
You were there 4 years.
Yep. Well, 5 years.
5 years.
School too.
Oh, okay. So 5 years. Then after Carnegie Mellon, where did you end up?
Yeah, so I went out to Silicon Valley. Like any sort of tech person, you have the stars in your eyes about Silicon Valley. So I went out to California, worked for Yahoo for about 2 years, and then a couple of my friends from CMU had a startup that I joined called SpunCell, and I was there for 3 years. But then, my family's on the East Coast, and a lot of my friends were on the East Coast. When you do computer science, sometimes you have a segment of people who go on Wall Street instead of going on tech. So I had a bunch of friends who were working on Wall Street. And, I'm East Coast guy, my family's East Coast. So I moved to New York about a decade ago, and I've lived in Brooklyn ever since. But I've always been the entrepreneurial type. Back when I was a kid, I was the kid who had the lemonade stands. I was the kid, that's just who I was. And so, even back when I was working at Yahoo, my first job out of school, I was like, geez, this is too big. This is just too cumbersome. It's too sort of corporate-y for me. And so I always had in my head that I wanted to start my own company because, right now, I don't know if you guys who are on audio can see this. I'm just wearing a T-shirt and jeans. I'm not a particularly formal guy. And so I never wanted to sort of wake up by an alarm and wear a suit and get in the office at 9. That was just never me. So I always knew I wanted to start a company, but I never really had the resources to do it until I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah, tell us about that. What's that whole process of applying for the show?
Okay, so what happened was, again, me being a Yinzer, I used to read the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette every single day. online, not like the paper version.
Right.
Just to kind of like, get a sense of what's going on back home. Now, I was reading an article, and like somewhere at the bottom of this article, there was a little like blurb that said, oh, by the way, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is coming back on the air. If you want to try out for the show, call this number. And I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty good at trivia. I'll call this number. And it wasn't like an audition or anything like that. It was basically you call in, and it's like a quiz. And so they'll ask you like, put these Michael Jackson albums in order from latest to earliest. And you're like, okay, 1 would be Thriller and 2 would be Bad and whatever. And you use the touch tone to answer the question. And so I answered 5 questions, and I guess I got them right. They're like, congratulations, like, like leave your name and number, and if you're selected to be on the show, we'll let you know. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And so like 9 months later, it was like a pretty long amount of time. I remember I was sitting at my desk at the place I was working at the time, and I get this number from like a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was like, 201, blah, 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 blah. And normally when that happens, I don't answer it because it's usually spam or something like that. But like, I don't know what made me answer it. I was like, oh, you know what? Like, this could be something important. And I answered it, and they're like, pick up the phone. I'm like, hi, this is so-and-so from ABC. Like, you've been selected to be on the show. And I'm like, I almost forgot about it. I was like,
It's been so long.
Yeah, I was like, what do you mean? They're like, okay, well, you're going to be on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Tell us what date you like to come in for your taping. And so I picked. It's actually, weirdly enough, it's pretty close. I think tomorrow is the 10-year anniversary of the taping. Or maybe it's the 10-year anniversary of when it was aired. But, like, it was about a decade ago. And, yeah, like, I just showed up to the studio, and they put me into makeup. And
So there was not, like, pre-interviews? They didn't...
No.
You didn't have to send in a video or anything like that?
That show was kind of like Jeopardy in that, like, they kind of just wanted smart people.
Yeah.
Like they didn't necessarily want someone, like, who was, like, super exuberant.
Yeah.
Like, they kind of just wanted to see... Because what's best for them is someone winning $1 million. Like, that's the best marketing they can do. And so I think they just basically just wanted to get some smart people in there.
So you went in, it was pretty soon after that phone call?
Yeah, it was maybe like 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
And so you get onto the set, and then, like, is it Regis? Was he
Yeah, it was
still there?
Regis. Yeah, it was Regis.
Okay.
And, like, Regis is like 5'2". I don't know if you ever met Regis. So, they basically, like, the couple things they told me was, like, don't look at the camera, or, like, don't look at the lights, like, just kind of stay in the moment. But whenever Regis stands up, let him stand up first, because you're going to tower over him. So, like,
Right.
just like, make sure you got, like, the, like, you're sensitive to that, because it's going to look weird on camera.
Oh, that's funny. So you have to give a lifeline,
Yep.
right? So who was your lifeline?
One of my buddies from college.
One of your buddies from college.
Yep. And they also had a celebrity phone a friend who was Gwen Ifill, who was a political commentator for PBS.
Right.
And I asked the audience once on a question, but ended up walking away with $100,000, which was at.
What was your question?
I have to go remember it. It was something about the movie Endless Love. Like, it was like basically it was like, what was the protagonist's name from the movie Endless Love? And I was like, that movie came out like 4 years before I was born. So,
Remember Brooke Shields and, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
And it was the blonde guy.
Yeah.
Christopher Atkins or something? Or,
I don't know.
Yeah, no idea.
You would know. I
Yeah.
thought you didn't watch
Yeah.
movies that much.
What? Yeah.
When I saw the
should have been your lifeline.
Yeah. When I saw the question, I was like, okay, I don't know that. Like, so like, I wasn't going to guess. I was like, you know what? I'll just kind of take my money and walk away. But when I got into the seat, like, I was like, all right, well, I knew what I wanted to do with the money. I wanted to start a company if I could. And the company I wanted to start was Numberfire. I had the idea already. And, I kind of just reasoned that for me to kind of get the product out there to kind of launch it, I would need about a year's worth of my time. And for me to go quit my job and basically maintain living expenses in New York City for a year, I would need to win about $50,000 for me to feel comfortable doing that. And minus taxes, that's actually winning $100,000 because it gets taxed at 50%. So once I got to $100,000, like, you could actually see it on the tape. You could see me just like let out this huge exhale.
You knew you were there.
Because I knew no matter what happened, like, regardless of whether the question, I knew the next question or not, I was at
You're already there.
You were there.
So when I saw the question and I didn't know it, I was like, whatever, like, I'm just going to walk away.
Did you have any lifelines left?
No. Like, I had it down to 50-50, meaning, like, it was either A or C or B or D. Like, I had to, like I knew it wasn't two of them, but I wasn't going to guess. It was way too much of a risk. And so I won the $100,000, and I basically the very next day walked into my job and, like, talked to my boss and said, look, like, I like it here, but, I got to go. Like, there's only, I would equivocate being on the show to basically, like, logging into your account one day and all of a sudden there's $100,000 that wasn't there yesterday.
Right.
I remember in Monopoly they had the card like the bank error in your favor.
Right.
That's basically what that felt like.
Yeah.
How quick did they pay?
I got the check, like a physical check, like I think a couple days later.
Wow.
And it was for the full $100,000. And so I had talked to an accountant, and they're like, you got to pay taxes on that. So, like, don't go spending $100,000 because you're going to have to. So, like, I kind of, breathe a little bit. My family wanted me to come back home to Pittsburgh and put down a mortgage and buy a house and all that. I'm like, because.
So how long were you thinking of Number Fire before you went on the show?
I've had that idea pretty much all my life.
Really?
Because I always wanted to work in sports and I always wanted to work in tech. And, what always sort of frustrated me about sports, and this is not a knock on the Stephen A. Smiths or the Skip Baylesses of the world, but when you watch a Sports Center or you're reading advice about fantasy sports, so much of that advice is qualitative. It's like, hey, I think the Cowboys are going to do that. I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to do that. And, for me, that just didn't make sense because if you have all this information available, why wouldn't you go and use that information to kind of like try to figure out things? Right. So it's something I always wanted to do. And, whether you're just a Steelers fan who wants to know something interesting about Ben Roethlisberger, whether you're a coach who wants to know, what some of the opposing team's tendencies are, whether you're a fantasy sports player who wants to know, do I pick A or B, all that stuff is basically a data-driven decision. And so I wanted to build out a system which allowed me to kind of, unlock the mysteries of what's going on because, maybe 20 years ago, a company like NumberFire wouldn't have been possible because the computing power wasn't there to go and do the things I needed to do. But, I was like at the right time where, cloud computing was coming available and grid computing was coming available. And so it was sort of like a lot of things were coming together. And I was like, I got to do this now or else I'm going to go crazy. So, yeah, I just kind of went for it and it worked out.
So
I like the name Numberfire.
Yeah.
I have a great
name.
story about that. So I didn't know what to name it. And so what I did is I basically wrote a script on a computer where I matched up a group of prefixes like number and stat and, like math, and then a bunch of suffixes like fire and int and, like these very like .com things.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the script basically paired up one of the prefixes and one of the suffixes and then made a query out to see if the .com version was available. And so out of all those permutations, the only .com that was available was numberfire.com. That was the only one that was available.
Wow.
And I was like, I actually kind of like that name. It kind of is pretty cool. So
strong name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It worked out. It worked out.
Well, you know what? If your numbers are on fire, your team's usually doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. It's very
Well, the
positive.
logo we have is like basically like a football that's on fire. It was like I like that logo probably cost me $5. I got like a clip art of a football and a clip art of like a flame and just kind of put them
Surprised it
together.
wasn't a hockey puck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we do have a couple different versions of it. Like we still call it Number Fire, but like on our hockey section, it's like a hockey puck that's like this flaming trail.
So you start Number Fire. Who's the first person you call to join you?
The very first person I called is the guy who's still with me. He's my chief analyst named Keith Goldner. Keith Goldner is even more of a math nerd than I am, and he's not going to be offended when I say that. He'll probably laugh when he hears it. He was right out of Northwestern and had interned for, I think, the 76ers and had interned for ESPN. And, he was really, really ahead of the game about analytics. And, I think he turned down a job with the Eagles to come work for me because, I think, when you work in the field of analytics, you could work for one team and like all your work's sort of constrained inside of this little box, or you can kind of like work for a company like mine and try to influence the entire industry. And so he took a pretty big risk because at the time we were just it was just me. We didn't even have an office yet. We didn't have any VC financing. We didn't have a business model. We didn't have any of that. But I guess I'm a pretty good salesman. So
you sold him on it.
Yeah, he was the first one, and
You gave him a couple Iron Cities and said,
yeah.
Let's go do this.
Yeah, I think I bought him like a Brian Westbrook jersey, and then just kind of like, like, all right, let's go to work.
So it's pretty interesting, Number Fire, with all the analytics. So when you guys grab that analytics, it's already been produced for you, and you're just putting it in, right? So you're taking it from the teams, the stats, and everything?
So sort of, like, the way to describe it is, like, what we're getting in is basically just the raw information. And so we're ingesting play-by-play information. We're ingesting basic statistics. And what we're creating is derivatives of those statistics. And so the main example I use is in football, we use a statistic called expected points. And what expected points basically means is, let's imagine two scenarios. You got one scenario where Gus Frerotte, the quarterback, throws for 15 yards on a 3rd and 20. And then you got another scenario where Gus Frerotte, the quarterback, throws for 3 yards on a 3rd and 1. Now, in the first scenario, you threw for 15 yards. On paper, that looks so much more impressive than throwing for 3 yards. But in the second scenario, because it was 3rd and 1, you had a first down conversion, and therefore you increased your team's chances of continuing the drive and scoring points. And so if all you're looking at is the numbers, you're going to think, oh, that 15-yard play was more important. But actually, the 3-yard play was more important. And so, that's an example of how just straight numbers isn't going to tell you the context of what's happening. And so when you use expected points, at any point in a drive, you've got a certain amount of probability that you're going to score a field goal or score a touchdown and whatever. And so as your team gets closer to the end zone, your expected points goes up. And so expected points allows you to understand, how a certain player influences his team's opportunity to score points and by extension win the game. And so, there are a lot of players in the NFL who may have like 5,000 passing yards, but actually have low expected points because those passing yards came in garbage time or they came on 3rd and 20 or
ends up in field goals
right.
or something like that.
Right. So, a better way of looking at performance is, not so much the 5,000 yards, but how did this player impact his team's chances of winning and scoring points? And so, we'll ingest a lot of the very basic information, but we'll go through our data systems, our models, and spit out these more advanced statistics. So, in baseball, there's a difference between batting average and ops or slugging or WOBA. And so we're basically almost inventing statistics that help us kind of understand things in the way, we choose to think about them.
So has that been hard for you to watch the Pirates and know those statistics this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely frustrating. Literally last night there was a tweet from the GM of the Mets, and the GM said basically the decisions we make, 95% of the time the analytics guys think we're doing the wrong thing, but we're professionals and we're going to shoot from the gut and we're going to it drives me crazy to see stuff like that because analytics isn't magic. We're not making this stuff up. This is what the numbers say. Yeah. And I understand the reticence of if I'm a GM, I wouldn't want some analytics guy to tell me everything you're doing is wrong. You have to do it this way. But to just ignore the numbers and ignore the data and go strictly from the gut,
right.
You wouldn't do that in any other industry, right? If I went to Wall Street and said, I'm going to go buy Apple because, wow, that blue iPhone looks really cool. I'd get laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
In a power plant, it's well, I think we should increase the power because, a lot of people are using the ACs these days. That's not acceptable to make a decision that way, but for some reason in sports it is.
Yeah, we've done it this way forever, and we're not going to change.
Then it comes down to, we played. You didn't play
right,
junior.
right.
Okay, we know what it's
all right,
like.
Yeah, go back to the computer lab.
Yeah, we won championships before. Yeah. Well, nobody was doing analytics back then when you did win.
Yeah.
Might have been a totally different game if there was analytics in the 50s and 60s. Yeah.
So if you have like a football team, there's 53 players.
Yep.
Do you take individual stats, like how fast they ran the 40,
Sure.
and then give each player a kind of their own analytics?
Yep.
And then that way, because Dave and I were talking about this, that if your team, you want to give the team a chance to win.
Sure.
Like it showed on FanDuel that Dave mentioned this, that you guys were predicting some of the outcomes already a whole way through the season.
Yep.
Of the games.
Yeah.
But what about, how does that change when a player gets hurt? And somebody else comes in?
Let's say that I was predicting the Steelers to win 10 wins this year. Well, if James Conner gets hurt, then you move in Jalen Samuels. By moving in Jalen Samuels, you're changing around the play calls we expect them to run. You change around the expected efficiency on those play calls. And so there is an adjustment that gets made. There's a mathematical formula to it because you're going from one asset that has a certain amount of efficiency to another one. So that might adjust it down from 10 to 8.5. So there are methodologies for doing that. But yeah, it's tough because there's so many moving parts, right?
Yeah. Football has to be the toughest one.
Oh, by far. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think in football is historically difficult to do is it's easy to do analytics for skill players like quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs. It's hard to do it for like a left guard.
Yeah,
because
how do you do that?
You have to combine a little bit of qualitative with it. So you have the quantitative in that the right guard pulled around and James Conner ran for 4 yards, and so I have to assign some of that play success to the right guard. But you do have to look at tape a little bit to say, all right, knowing that the successful play happened, if I look at the tape, did the right guard do what he was supposed to do? And if so, then okay, give him the credit for it. If not, then maybe you only give him half credit. So there is a level of qualitative to it that doesn't really exist in the other sports. And
But if you had the numbers from the RFID tags, you wouldn't even need to watch tape
Sure.
because you just have data.
Yeah.
It would be in number form.
Sure.
You could say, right guard is 76, and then we're going to watch his.
That's exactly right.
His everything
Yeah.
that he does.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's a blitz. He's supposed to pick up a middle linebacker, but that guy got a sack, so it's a negative. And how do you score that, though?
Yeah, like the main problem, and I should say, I've been out of the game for a couple of years because, not being the CPO of FanDuel, I've got 100 things to worry about, and so the analytics guys on my team are the ones that are probably more in depth than I am. So I've lost my fastball a little bit. The main problem with the RFID
You're in
stuff.
Pittsburgh. That's
about
par for the course.
You only Tommy John Paul. One of the interviews over. So, right.
Like with the RFID stuff, you're tracking that stuff on like a second by second basis, and so in a given game of football, you might get a terabyte of data about that, and so that's a lot of data to process. That's a whole lot of noise, and you're trying to find the signal amongst that noise, and so computing power just almost isn't there yet to be able to kind of wrap your head. It might be, but it's still in early stages.
Yeah.
And so I think right now the ability to collect data is kind of outpacing the ability to do useful things with that data, and that's going to catch up. That's just Moore's law. But around skill player or non-skill players like guards and linemen and linebackers, it's harder than it is for skill players.
What's tough, Hall of Fame wise, I think Alan Faneca is a football player, one of the best to ever play, but it's all boy, he was really good.
Yeah.
There was nothing.
Yeah,
so it's real easy to put in
pancakes,
receiver
I guess.
Yeah. It's real easy.
It's the same thing like Joe Jacoby. All the people who are fans of the Redskins don't understand why Joe Jacoby was just a monster of a man and was a great lineman, one of the hogs. It's not in the Hall of Fame. He's been put up so many times, I don't know if he can ever go in, which is crazy. And it's there's.
Whereas Art Monk, what he's done is very, very clear. It's receptions, touchdowns.
Right, exactly. And for those linemen and those D linemen, even D linemen, right? You get sacks, so that it gives you a statistic that you can follow.
Yep.
But that's pretty interesting
and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
tell us now from Number Fire to FanDuel. How did that happen?
Yeah, with the rise of what FanDuel was doing when they first started with daily fantasy sports, daily fantasy sports was kind of it still is. Somewhat complex to play. You have to pick players, you have to align to a salary cap, and there's some strategy that goes into it. And so, with Number Fire, as we saw that industry emerging, we wanted to build tools to help players play. And so there's kind of a natural, nice relationship we had with FanDuel and DraftKings at the time. One day we got an email from someone who worked for FanDuel and said, hey, we want to move in a direction where, we want to signal to our users that we really do want them to win more and to have access to tools and have the best information possible. Would you guys be interested in kind of something more than just a kind of a casual relationship? And I said, yeah, sure. And so they ended up purchasing us about 4 years ago now. And it's been great. Most of my team is still there, and a lot of the tools that you might use on FanDuel, we've built out, different ways of drafting players, different ways of, making live scoring easier. A lot of the IP that we built at Number Fire just slotted right into what FanDuel was doing, and it's been an amazing ride.
So, do you have you ever been approached by a professional team?
Oh yeah.
For the analytics side of it.
Yeah, so we've actually done a lot of stuff. I don't want to name names because
right.
But yeah, what's interesting about it is, we can be that quantitative second opinion. And when you have an entire room of scouts, whether it's, for drafting or for free agency, those scouts are going to be pretty qualitative. And so if you want a quantitative second opinion, we're definitely there for that. the other thing is imagine you're an agent and you're representing a player. When you go in to have negotiations with a team, that team probably has an analytics guy who kind of goes in there with the data. And so if you're an agent who doesn't have data on your side, then you're at a disadvantage because they're going to be using the data to come up with as many different data points as possible to try to convince you that you're not worth what you think you're worth. And so we have a couple players that we work with, trying to get them the best contract because, we would cherry pick some information that would say they're actually worth this, and the other side would have information. And so there actually is a lot of analytics and teams and players that we do on sort of a consulting basis.
Yeah, so the player side would be very interesting because there's different things. You can profile a player to see what their makeup is, their emotional side, their physical side, all that, what their talent is. And then there's the stats that come from that, right, which you do. And for me as a player, I can remember so many exit interviews, right, with your coaches. Like the season's over, go talk to your coach, and then they go, well, what do you think you need to improve on? I don't know, probably everything, right? I don't know. I need to, I'm good at throwing the ball 25 yards downfield, or, I have a big arm. I love to stand in the pocket. I probably love to improve on my scrambling or whatever. But if I have those stats, and the coach says, look, last year to this year, your first down, you threw this many % of first down balls. Let's bring that up. Let's work on it. Let's give you some real stats to work on. Because we know we all want to be bigger, faster, and stronger in the NFL. That's how you survive. Or you want to lean down, or you want to do all these things. But the numbers, those stats that you're talking about, it really hit home when you said, hey, I threw a 15-yard pass, but I didn't get the first down, but I threw a 3-yard pass and got the first down. It makes me think of Tom Brady. His that stat for him is probably through the roof compared to a lot of other people in the league.
It's all about efficiency. At the end of the day, you want to maximize the amount of positive expectation you have per play. And so, maybe there's some quarterbacks like Joe Flacco or Matthew Stafford can throw the ball from here to West Virginia, but if they're not making the correct read or the right read, then all the arm strength in the world doesn't matter. Which is why I think over a long enough time frame, the quarterbacks that probably have the longest, most durable careers are the ones that make the right decisions, the one that understand the context and understand that I don't need 10 yards now, I need 3. And so making the right call, making the right, reads, is really important, and that could be informed by analytics.
Do you think that the personal side of sports, the individuals that you guys people are playing and trying to bet on and win money, and individual side, but they have a personal life too. Do you think that plays a role in any of this?
It does.
Because if I had 3 babies when I was playing for the Redskins. And there were nights that I was sleepless, and things happen. They're sick, and you're dealing with your wife, and there's all these things. But to me, that doesn't take into account into the analytics side of it.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think that is sort of a hole in the game, so to speak. I think from our perspective, it gets a little bit overrated in the minds of people tend to overthink. For example, so if there's a game that's snowing, for example, people will think, oh, well, it's snowing, they're not going to be able to throw the ball. And in most cases, people overrate that. Actually, snowing doesn't affect throwing the ball that much. Only in extreme examples does it. And so to some extent, some of the environmental stuff that you can't really quantify gets a little bit overrated, but there are things that we'll never have transparency to. We'll never know that you had a newborn. I'm not going to know that LeBron James only got 4 hours of sleep last night. There are certain things that we're just not going to know. So all we can really do is do the best we have with the information we have available. And
so could you take? So Dave and I are part of a company here in Pittsburgh. It's called RC21X. We're partners with Clementi Family, and it's an app that measures and monitors your brain performance.
Sure.
And it's an objective test that takes about 5 minutes, and it lets you understand your short-term memory, your executive decision-making, all that. Now, you get a score at the end. We don't diagnose anything or any of that. And I always try to get into the sports industry because I think it's very powerful to understand your brain performance. If you have that number, if I have 2 cornerbacks, and one's a Hall of Famer and All-Pro, and then I have another guy, and their performance literally says there's a difference.
Yeah.
I think that's an intangible that isn't out there yet.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And I know I've talked to several players. They don't want to use it because they don't want it to determine in a negative way their contract or not getting picked up by a team.
A pre-draft tool to use for teams.
Yeah, I've talked to the combine.
Versus,
Like,
like,
I think it would be
Wonderlic.
great to be in a combine
Sure.
because it's a more of a predictor of who that person is than, like, say, the Wonderlic. Like
Yeah,
you
or like
talked
the,
about.
yeah, like the vertical. Yeah, I think the more information we have available, the richer and more accurate our prediction is going to be. I think, whether it's brain performance, whether it's blood pressure, like, I know the NFL is making a big push into wearables, and so not just RFID to track movement, but like to track like how fast you're going, like what your blood pressure is, things like that. The more information we have, the better it's going to be. So I can understand like from the NFLPA perspective why they might not want that
Right.
sort of stuff. But yeah, the more information we have, it's just going to be a little more valuable.
I always thought about this, Dave, with the app. Like if I just get up in the morning and I play it, I'm going to have a certain score.
Yep.
Now, what happens if I go to full exhaustion? I've been running and come in and play it. What is my score at full exhaustion compared? How does my brain function
Right.
in all of that? Right?
Fourth quarter versus pregame.
Well, I
Yeah.
always give this example is that I've seen so many guys come and go in the NFL, and you look at him and you say, this guy jumps higher than anybody on the team, or he's faster than anybody, And I've seen guys faster than Darryl Green, but they don't play as long as Darryl
Yep.
Green, right? So they're missing something, and they jump off sides, or they
Yeah,
forget
sure,
the play,
sure.
or their
Yep.
reaction time is bad. They're missing a piece, and that's what this app, I always wanted to get it in there because it'll find out what that limited
Sure, that's exactly
resource
right. I
is.
mean, like the when you were saying that, the one sport I thought of more than anything else is tennis, because you look at certain athletes like Federer or Nadal, a Djokovic or Serena Williams, like the mental toughness you have to be an elite tennis player is through the roof. Every single point you have to have immense focus. If you mess something up in the last point, get it out of your head. This is a new
Right.
point. And the players who have the most success in tennis have that cognitive ability to just like always maintain focus, always like just maintain that mental toughness. And that's a skill set that's very difficult to scout. It's very difficult to suss out. Like going through like a combine interview and like you're talking to players, like you're trying to get your head around that, but there's no real way to do it. But if there was some way to quantify that, that'd be a massively valuable thing.
Well, we kind of do that a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's just interesting. It's been for 2 years trying to figure out how to do that. Because you have entrepreneurial spirit, and I was so excited to leave like the game that I love, transition. I coached for a little bit, then all of a sudden we're in something that could play a factor in
Sure.
all that, which is exciting. But it's so new that
Yeah, sports
it's
psych to me
hard
is
to
really
grasp
interesting. I go to the MIT conference every year, like the Sloan, like the big nerd fest that goes on there. And yet we see stuff there all the time, like new helmets and like ball tracking and basketball, and just like different shoes, like the amount of people who are thinking about that to me is really cool because late in the day, like sports is just it's just like having fun. You're throwing a ball around, but like the amount of people who are thinking about how to get that 1% advantage, that 2% advantage, and there's always new ideas. It's really cool.
So you're at FanDuel now.
Yep.
So when you merged Numberfire and
Yep.
FanDuel, now what is your job?
Yeah,
Day
so
to day, what are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm the chief product officer at FanDuel. So for lack of better phrasing, I basically decide what we build and when. So obviously with PASPA being repealed and sports gambling being available on a state-by-state basis, that's taken up a lot of our attention. That's sort of why I'm in Pennsylvania right now. But yeah, so I think what we want to do is with FanDuel, we want FanDuel to be sort of a one-stop shop for any kind of like fun sports games that someone could play on their phone or on their computer. And so maybe that's fantasy sports, maybe that's sports betting, maybe that's horse racing, maybe that's maybe in time we'll build out a trivia app, or maybe in time we'll build out like a Madden style game. I think what we want to do is we realize that sports are something that like so many people love, and when you're watching a game, it's imagine that to be the ice cream. Well, the cherry on top is fantasy sports. And maybe the whipped cream is having a bet on the game. And so we want to build out these sort of like really cool experiences. And for someone who's a sports fan like me, it's perfect. But yeah, I think like FanDuel has about, I think we're north of 1,000 employees now.
Wow.
And it's really just sort of like there's all this stuff we want to do, and I kind of have to decide, all right, we're going to do this first, and we're going to do this next, and we're going to go into this market after that. And it's I work very closely with our engineering team and our executive team, and just basically decide what we build.
Yeah, there's a lot of bookies who aren't real happy.
Why?
It's funny.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's how it
Uncle
used to
Joe
be done.
down the
yeah,
street, yeah.
Uncle Joe down the street.
Yeah,
like,
he's-
hey, Uncle Joe, I got 10 on the Steelers. Now it's great. You just pull your phone out and click it, and
Well, it's a matter of consumer protection. I mean, with Uncle Joe down the street, like if you win big, then all of a sudden he's not calling you back, right?
Right.
So
Well, it saves your kneecaps, too.
Yeah.
Uncle Joe's henchman.
one thing I think that we take very, very seriously. Obviously we're excited about where the market's going and how big it is. We take responsible gaming very, very seriously. We have a lot of models and a lot of we can proactively tell when we think someone has problematic behavior. And so if you were betting or playing DFS, like $10 a week, $10 a week, $10 a week, and all of a sudden it's $1,000, we'll flag that immediately.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of a perception that that we're not paying attention to that stuff or we don't care. But we actually do care quite a bit.
What would happen if that was flagged?
Would be sort of you get a call from our team.
Oh, wow.
Your account would probably be suspended. You go into sort of a
Probation.
yeah, something like that. Yeah. Because we're in this for the long term. With startups, especially sort of what's going on with Lyft and Uber and stuff like that. It may kind of seem like startups just there to make money now and kind of worry about the future later. But, I want FanDuel to be in business for 10, 15, 20, 30, to be like the IBM of this. And so the only way we do that is if we take a very long-term approach and, take things like responsible gaming very, very seriously, take our relationships with the state regulators very, very seriously. We never cut any corners. We never, ever push boundaries. We do things to a T because we want to do things right. We want our users to feel safe, and we want our relationships with, the state regulators and everyone else to be as above board as possible.
You guys had to be pretty excited when the government said that betting is legal.
Oh, sure. It was,
that's like a home run.
Yeah. Well,
crazy.
We built up a really great brand on the fantasy side, being that sort of mobile, digital, fun sports brand. And so when, betting came online, first was New Jersey, now it's Pennsylvania, and there's 11 states now which have some level of legal betting. We had that brand already. And so if we're going up against an MGM or a Caesars, we like our chances because, we've proven ourselves to be the technology company in this space. We're not a brick and mortar. We're not a legacy company. We're a bunch of technologists and engineers and designers that are building out products, not just, casino operators.
Well, this has to be a nightmare to the offshore, the Antigua and all that.
Yeah.
Because it's a very clean, very recognized name, FanDuel.
Yeah.
That now not legitimizes it,
Sure.
but it gives you a perception of
I've definitely gotten into trouble for being very candid about my feelings about the offshore guys.
Yeah.
And definitely there are people internal to FanDuel who are all right, take it easy. Maybe
right.
But look, again, I look at it strictly from a consumer protection perspective. If you use an offshore site, those sites aren't legal. They use the argument that if they're not explicitly illegal, then they must be legal, and that's a ridiculous argument.
Yeah.
And so you remember what happened in poker, 5 or 6 years ago. Everyone was using Party Poker and Poker Stars and whatever, and then the government just went in and shut those sites down. Right. And then everyone who had money on those sites didn't get that money back until way later, if at all. I don't want that to happen. And so, if you use an offshore site, that is possible / likely to happen at some point because it's illegal.
Right.
And so, I don't have much love for those guys. And that's also why, as far as the way FanDuel operates, we operate things by the books. We never cut any corners. We have very open and honest relationships with state lawmakers and regulators. We're in this for the long haul, and we want to do things in a sustainable way.
Do you guys ever talk about, okay, we have to be careful that we're not approached by athletes?
Oh, sure.
That want to change the game and all
100%.
that? You have to have those
100%.
kind of talks.
We take that very, very seriously. We've got, in the same way we've got models that help us understand when someone could be problematic gambler, we also have models to just determine all kinds of fraud, whether it's money laundering, whether it's someone who might be a player. If someone just kind of comes in one day and just puts $50,000 on Pitt, that's going to raise a red flag, right?
Right.
So there's all kinds of models to do that. We have, in the same way that my team has a lot of data guys doing the analytics, we've also got a bunch of data guys looking at things like that just to make sure that there aren't any problematic patterns that we need to capture.
How are the lines determined? Do you guys use a third party or how does that work?
Yeah, so FanDuel Group is partially owned by a European company called Paddy Power Betfair. And Paddy Power Betfair has been an operator in Europe for 20, 30, 40 years. And so what's been really instrumental to our success here in the States is we've been able to pair the strength of the FanDuel brand and our ability to build products with a lot of the operational back end they bring to the table. Because if we were just going to come to the market as a new company, we'd have to rethink and learn all that stuff on the fly. Whereas they had stuff out of the box that was like, okay, they've got an entire risk and trading team that sets those lines. Like they know exactly if Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to play tomorrow, they would be like, okay, that line just moved from 3 to 5. They have all that stuff sort of out of the box. And so we've been able to marry those two things. And it's one of the main reasons why we've been as successful as we've been.
Well, it's just incredible how close they are so often.
Oh, it's amazing.
Even the over and unders.
Yeah.
Just crazy with that. I think that what you guys are doing is incredible because you're taking something that everybody's been doing for a long time, with Uncle Joe or whoever it is. We've been doing that, but now people have been waiting for it to be legitimate.
I've been amazed at the demand. It's been, we've got a retail location, like a physical sports book at the Meadowlands over by the Giants and Jets play, and that place is a madhouse on Sundays. Even not even Sunday, like a Thursday, or like a Wednesday for basketball. That place is a madhouse, and so it's one of those things. I kind of equivocate it to like marijuana a little bit, which is look, this is happening whether you admit it or not, right? People are going to do this, so as opposed to just saying oh, it's illegal and pretending it's not happening, why not just legalize it and say, we'll take a cut of it, because then the state gets the taxes, but then the consumers get consumer protection. They get reputable brands behind it. They get fraud protection behind it. They it's really a win-win.
Well, as a consumer, you're going to get paid. Your payment to FanDuel to open an account is really going to be credited. It's all the stuff that you're afraid of and the offshore stuff is not a concern.
FanDuel's been in business for 10 years, and we operate retail locations. My email address is available to anyone who wants to go find it, and so you should have every single confidence that if you deposit $10 and you win $20, we're going to give you that $20. There's no question of that. And so I think that's the biggest thing that that has really sort of supercharged this is now it's finally out in the open. Now it's run like an actual business, and it's not Uncle Joe. It's like an actual company.
Do you guys have issues with real-time information at all, or is that kind of past the point?
Yeah, not really. I mean, there are some sports which it's theoretically available to get an advantage, but no, not really. I mean, the latency time. So we work with Stats and Sports Inc. and a lot of the data providers. We'll get the information in nanoseconds. Those pipes, so to speak, are so quick that it's not so much a problem anymore.
So I went to my friend runs professional bull riding.
Okay, all right.
And it's a growing industry, and they're getting bigger and bigger.
Yep.
And they changed how the whole scoring is done because they had such latency in the scoring because professional bull riding is all over the world, right? Sometimes they said in the old days it would take 2 weeks to get scores from Brazil to get back to USA to figure out who's the next, the next one up. So they changed how the scoring is done, and it's instant now. It's incredible.
Yep.
And he said it's changed bull riding.
Sure.
Where it's grown tremendously.
Yeah.
Is that something else that you guys would get into?
Oh,
as well?
Sure. Probably on a monthly basis, we talk to someone like bull riding. We've had drone racing league. We've talked to the XFL and AAF when it was around. I think for us, we want to be able to work with anyone who wants to be able to have a fantasy game around what they're doing or have bets available. I think as long as you've got a data feed we can work from, then we can have that conversation.
Yeah, because we went and it was we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
When we went to the one in West Virginia, but it was so exciting. It was like.
Well, they get more viewers on their Sunday show than the NHL national broadcast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big time.
Sure. There's some areas we won't go. We won't go into Little League, right?
Yeah. High school sports. Yeah. We're not doing that.
There's some areas
Just
where
take Chinese Taipei. And
we're not going to do it. But high school sports is another good one. But for the most part, as long as we feel like there's a credible market for it, we'll do it. I mean, it's been interesting. In a lot of ways, fantasy sports and betting almost legitimizes the sport in the same way that poker wasn't legitimized until ESPN started showing it.
Right.
And so there probably are a couple areas where, that are just sort of like ripe for this. Like it's a great sport to bet on. It's a great sport to play fantasy on, and all that demand is going to make it all that cooler. So one area, believe it or not, that we've thought a lot about, one is esports, which I'm sure is just been kicking around forever. But I think darts is really interesting because like darts is it's fast paced. It's great to watch. From a streaming perspective, the streaming rights are somewhat inexpensive, so you might be able to watch a darts match inside of the FanDuel app.
You're right.
And like we can wrap a betting experience around it. And so there are a couple people in our office, especially some of the UK guys, who are just like kicking down my door, being like, "Okay, guys, darts, let's go."
Yeah.
That's great to watch if you ever watch it.
Oh, darts is amazing. Oh yeah,
unbelievable.
and
They can have like 3 pints and still throw bulls.
oh yeah,
That's unbelievable.
In the UK, like they run out with these big convention halls. They get like 10,000 drunk people in there watching a guy play darts, and like,
So speaking of UK, are you guys international?
yeah. So FanDuel isn't. So FanDuel is a part of the Paddy Power Betfair group, and we've got a lot of operations in Europe. And so the Paddy Power Betfair brands have pretty strong market share in Europe. FanDuel is the brand we have here in the States. In Australia, we have a brand called Sportsbet. And in Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, but the Balkan state of Georgia, there's a company called Ajarabet. So, having this worldwide, sort of portfolio allows us to sort of like share learnings, allows us to share a common back end. It allows us to have a lot of efficiency in our processes. And so
if I live in Africa, say, and
Yep.
I follow American sports,
Yep.
can they get on FanDuel from there? And
no, so like they would have to use a local
okay.
company for that. So, one thing the regulators are very, very serious about here in the States is around geolocation. So, for example, Pennsylvania is legal for mobile sports betting, but Ohio isn't. And so they want to make sure that if I'm walking along the border between Pennsylvania and Ohio, if I'm 10 feet on this side of the border in Pennsylvania, it should work. But if I walk 10 feet over there, it shouldn't work. And so that's a level of like granularity you have to have.
Because I didn't know that.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, they're very, very serious about that. And like you get into some weird situations where like what if I'm in New York City and I'm in a ferry that's going across the Hudson. All of a sudden I'm in New Jersey. Like, you have to be able to determine where you cross that line.
Yeah.
And so it's a pretty complex challenge, but I do understand where the states are coming from. Like they want to make sure that like, if you are in Pennsylvania, you're allowed to, but if you're in Ohio, you're not. Because
it has to deal with money and everything.
Yeah, there's
else.
tax implications. There's like, it's something that we have to take very seriously.
What about in Canada? Are you guys in Canada?
FanDuel for DFS, so you can play DFS contests in Canada, but not for betting yet. No.
Yeah, you could do fantasy, but
Yeah.
you couldn't do.
Yeah. And I think that's like there's some provinces which are like a little more flexible than others, but yeah, it's it really seems like every other day there's a new state or a new province or a new country that like changes around the law on this. Like in the past 3 months, like Illinois been moving forward, Iowa's been moving forward, Tennessee's been moving forward. It's been sort of like a tsunami on this stuff.
So do you have to follow that, or do you just like?
The legal team follows it.
Yeah, they just know.
They just tell me
right
what to
away,
do.
and like they're gonna jump on it.
I mean, like I'm on the emails. I know what's going on, but like the legal team is on top of it.
Now, another reason you're in Pittsburgh is you've just formed a partnership with Jerome Bettis.
Yes.
You have to be pretty excited about that.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, as a Steelers fan, like Jerome Bettis is one, he's an amazing guy, and two, 10,000 rushing yards, 11,000 rushing yards. But yeah, he's been great. We do like to partner in local areas with sort of like local celebrities because it's one thing just to have like a general like ad, just running on KDK or whatever, but to have Jerome Bettis as the local brand ambassador, or Brian Westbrook in Philly, or in New York, have it be like Phil Simms or something like that. Like that carries a lot of weight. What we don't do is I don't want Jerome Bettis to say that he likes the app just because we're paying him. Like we actually did show him the app and had him use it and asked him what he thought because consumers are smart enough to tell when someone's being inauthentic, right? And Jerome Bettis, he's great at being authentic, and he was great in some of the shots we did with him because he actually did like the app. We showed it to him. He's like, "Oh wow, that's really cool." And he was asking us "Oh wow, how do I get to Notre Dame? How do I get to the Steelers?" Because those are his things. And so we showed him how to do it. But yeah,
How
it's
do I
been
watch
great.
the PBA?
Oh yeah,
for bowlers.
Yeah, like Dick Weber Jr. versus Parker Bond the third.
I'm really excited about that. So one of the last things we do is we call it the no huddle.
Okay.
The 2-minute drill.
All right.
Which I'm sure you got a lot of stats on
Run it
that.
through me, okay.
Yes, but we ask you a bunch of questions and we try to get through this, and you can pepper the answers back to us as quick as possible.
Okay.
So Dave always starts. Go ahead, Dave.
All right, and you can't say FanDuel for this answer, but
Okay, all right.
what's the best innovation in sports in the last 10 years?
I would say, I alluded to a little bit earlier, like I really like what the Rockets have done with the way they played the game. Like it's kind of like different than like way basketball is typically played. Like there's no like 2-point jumpers, but they've really changed around what I think the way basketball is played. So I'd say that.
Do you have a pet peeve?
I have a pet peeve. It's qualitative sports analysts.
So give us an example.
Yeah, I mean, like I just go like again, like I recognize the value he brings to the table, but like I can't watch Skip Bayless for more than like 30 seconds. It's just like this is so different than the way I approach things.
Well, so you would rather watch Shannon Sharp?
Oh, I'd rather watch like someone like like reading a math book than either one of those two.
What's the most overhyped thing in sports today?
Overhyped. I think in football, I think quarterback arm strength is the most overrated thing.
Really?
I do.
Ooh,
No
that
offense.
was, that was your.
We're gonna
was
send
your
that
bread
to
and
Brett
butter.
Favre.
Yeah.
Right.
Brett Favre had
Well, let me clarify that. Like, I think accuracy is underrated relative towards arm strength.
Right.
Put
No,
it that
I
way.
agree with that. I agree with that. Because it goes back to the old saying, this is covered,
Yeah.
this is open.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you don't have the arm strength in
Yeah.
certain situations to throw it over
I think
here.
GMs fall in love with guys who can like throw 60 yards from their knees, but they don't care about accuracy as much as they should.
But then you see guys like Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers who do have great arm strength and very accurate.
Yeah, when you're both, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff George had one of the best arms in
my
football,
gosh.
but he had a
Like
mediocre
just-
career.
Marino.
Yeah.
But, it's just so relative. And I played with guys like Steve Berline who had a great career, but his arm strength wasn't near what some of the other people I've played with. Yep.
As a fan, what was your greatest sports memory?
When the Penguins won the first Stanley Cup, '91, like they beat the Minnesota North Stars 8-0. I was 9, but I mean that was just amazing.
Did you have a mullet for?
Actually, weirdly enough, like I have to go back to some photos. I probably did because like back then,
Everybody
like
did.
the mullet and the rat tail was like a thing.
The
so,
rat tail.
yeah.
You had a rat tail, didn't you?
I might, maybe unintentionally. My mom cut my hair until I was about in college.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I probably
I had
did.
an unintentional rat tail. But that was a great memory. I was interning in Pittsburgh over the summer. I grew up in Tucson, but I was in KDKA, living on the north side when the celebration was at the point. I remember people swimming across the river. I mean, and then going out to the airport,
Yeah.
going out on the parkway, the traffic was like 1 mile an hour. People had kegs in their
Amazing.
pickup trucks,
Yeah.
walking along their car, drinking out of kegs, going to the airport. I mean, what a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
And that started the dynasty. Like,
yeah.
I mean, our hockey, we should just be so thankful over the last so many years
Yeah.
with the people that we've had playing.
Amazing.
Like,
Amazing. Yeah.
It's just been incredible.
The 2 draft picks and when they happened were
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
the most amazing.
So you've had an incredible career. You've been with these companies. You've been entrepreneurial like you wanted to be. If you go back and tell a young Nick that's running outside to go play and you stop him and you say, hey, I just want you to remember this one thing, what would that be?
I would say that just believe in yourself. Like like you've got the skills, go do it. Follow your dreams and don't let everyone ever say you can't do something. Like, and I didn't really run into that. It wasn't like I had people who doubted me, but I've always had a lot of sort of self-confidence. And when you're entrepreneurial, you kind of have to go and do something that maybe some people think you're kind of crazy. Like my own family thought I was crazy. They're like, just go buy a house in Pittsburgh and kind of settle down. But you have to believe in yourself and you have to believe in the power of sort of chasing after your dreams.
Well, I love your story on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You hit 100,000 and you're like,
That's it.
that's it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
got
didn't
it.
care after that. You knew that. Then
Yeah.
you were
I mean,
able to
like
take
I
the
would have
next
loved
step.
to win $1 million.
Yeah. But
But
you knew
yeah,
you were
yeah,
at a point that
yeah.
now you can take
Now I can go do it.
You can
Yep.
do another step.
Yep.
If you were commissioner of any league for a day, what would you change?
This is going to be kind of a crazy answer. Like, one of my dream jobs, other than the one I have, which is probably my dream job, if I had my second favorite job that I would ever want in life, I want to be the CEO of USA Track and Field. And I think track and field is a sport that I love dearly because I was so serious about it. And track and field, relative to public perception, has kind of dropped quite a bit.
Oh, yeah,
and I think there's a lot of things from a digital perspective, from reaching out to new audiences perspective that I think they could do. So if I was any job for one day, I'd be the CEO of USA Track and Field. I'd have a lot of conversations with companies like FanDuel, companies like ESPN, just like figure out how to get more younger fans into track and field.
I think one thing about track and field, I loved it in the 80s and maybe early 90s.
Yeah.
It seemed like there was more personalities,
Sure.
stuff that people that you really rooted for and
Yeah.
stuff. I think it's a little bit less than that.
Yeah,
now,
like
you know?
it's become a little bit corporate. It's become a little bit of you have these incredibly talented athletes, but they kind of like duck each other a little bit. Like you don't
Yeah.
get like the matchups, and like it's not televised the way it should be. And so yeah, I would love that. That'd be great.
So if you could give our fans one analytic, one thing they should watch for this football season to focus on, what would it be?
I'm not prepared. Like I'd have to think about that. I would say
stumped
that
him, Dave.
yeah,
Wow.
and like this
hard
is
to
going to
do.
come across as me being the Yinzer and like me, but like I think that people are wildly overrating the Browns right now. Like they are trading the Browns in like the best case scenario of what happens when everything goes right, when the chemistry is correct, when Baker Mayfield and Beckham Jr. and Chubb like all have the best possible performances. Like you have to show it in the field, and like most teams don't just go from like 4-12 or 12-4 like that. There's going to be some growing pains. I think I read a lot of articles about how the Browns are the favorites in the AFC North and et cetera, et cetera. I am a little bit skeptical, and so I not analytics per se, but like I think the general tone of people discussing the Browns, I think has led them to be overrated.
As he talks with an Iron City shirt on.
Yeah,
Right. Well, if your quarterback they have the best quarterback at slamming a beer on the jumbotron in front of
Well,
40,000 people.
But like, I think the Browns have been bad for so long that like everyone wants them to be good, right? So like they're
Yeah.
kind of like I want them to be good, so like I'm just going to imagine all these good things are going to happen and everything's going to work out perfectly. But like what happens when Beckham Jr. gets injured? Like what happens if Baker Mayfield like gets injured? Like what if like Odell Beckham Jr. like he's an amazing talent. Like he certainly had a lot of off the field and sort of like
Oh, sure.
so like you can't just assume that everything is going to work out perfectly. And so I think a lot of people are sort of using that I want good things to happen to Cleveland as an excuse to sort of just assume.
So what are the odds on the Browns winning the Super Bowl, you think?
I'd have to go look. I would bet Numberfire has them at something like, I'd say probably 3 or 4%.
Yeah, I'd probably agree.
Would be my guess.
I'd agree with that. Last one, Dave?
Yeah. Now, there's in the world of statistics. Do you have a least favorite statistic that's often utilized but not very important? Like mine was, and they kind of done away with it, game-winning RBIs.
Yeah.
I always thought that was so hokey because that could happen in like the fourth inning.
Yeah. Wins are typically way overrated, like whether it's a pitcher or like a hockey goalie, I think wins are overrated. But really, I mean, any counting statistic, any statistic that is just like counting up what happened, those are inherently going to be a little bit flawed. And so, again, using my example about expected points, you could have a quarterback that throws for 5,000 yards, and you could have another quarterback who only throws for 3,000. It might turn out that the quarterback who has 3,000 was a much more effective and efficient quarterback than the guy who has 5,000. And so, like whether it's Hall of Fame, whether it's like All-Star, whether it's like just talking about who the best players are, people overrate just counting statistics, like how many of this, how many of that. Like those get overrated in efficiency, and sort of advanced statistics get underrated.
We had to talk about Joe Namath, right?
Right.
If
If
you're
you
a
dig-
Hall of
if you dig
Famer
down,
and
it's-
you dig down into statistics,
Yeah.
they're not even close to a lot of the
I look
other
at Terry
guys.
Bradshaw. I mean, like Terry Bradshaw's numbers, like he's got more picks than TDs in his career.
It's
I
like
think.
within like one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like if you look at him and compare him to like some modern quarterback, you're like, wow, like Terry Bradshaw, this like how's this doing in the Hall of Fame? Well, the
Right.
game's changed around so much that
Right.
like you can't really do that apples to apples. But yeah, like any counting statistic I think gets overrated.
Well, especially how games are changing now too, with how long pitchers actually pitch.
Oh, yeah,
and all that. All
100
that
pitch
different.
count.
That's my.
Yeah.
That, if I have a pet peeve, that's mine.
the 100 pitch count.
Yeah.
Like we looked it up that Nolan Ryan actually threw 235 pitches in one game. And they
Yeah.
can't even get to like
Yeah,
80
yeah.
without them saying,
Yeah.
"Well, we got to
Doesn't
take
make
him
sense.
out
I mean,
fourth
like you
inning."
have like Clayton Kershaw, who's like mowing people down, and like he's just killing them, and take him out in the sixth to put on a pitcher who isn't as good as Clayton Kershaw. Then it doesn't always make sense.
I don't get it. And I think you have to throw longer to build your arm strength up.
Yeah.
Right? If you only throw no more than 5 innings, you're never going to be able to throw a full, complete game when you need to.
Yeah, in the playoffs when like you
Right.
want to, yeah.
Right, exactly. All right, so thank you so much for coming
my
in to
pleasure.
Huddle with us.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. It was very informative. Our fans are going to love it.